So if you're a massive movie fan, you probably think you have a pretty solid handle on what makes a film genuinely great, right? Well, today we're diving into this explainer to unlock a framework that's going to help you overcome your own hidden viewing biases. We're going to explore some absolutely fascinating research on how we as viewers actually get in our own way, and how fixing that can lead to a dramatically better movie-watching experience.
Okay, let's just rip the Band-Aid off and start with a really tough question. Are you secretly ruining your own movie experience? It's a pretty provocative thought, isn't it? Like, are you letting your own internal prejudices and misconceptions totally derail what could be a Friday night masterpiece? Because, trust me, it is incredibly easy to do without even realizing it's happening.
To understand why this happens, we have to talk about the invisible baggage we drag into the theater, or, onto our living room couch. Every single one of us reacts to films based on this wildly complex mix of internal and external forces. And here's the real kicker. These forces are completely beyond the filmmaker's control. They lie entirely outside the film itself. They're tied up in our current mood, our personal backgrounds, even just our daily stress levels. Yet, they heavily dictate how we experience the art on screen. Recognizing these subjective obstacles, that is the absolute first step to gaining true objectivity as a viewer.
Now, one of our biggest, most stubborn pitfalls is what's called categorical rejection. Actually, think about how many times you or maybe a friend has just completely dismissed an entire category of film. It's this rigid refusal to step outside the norm. Some folks flat out refuse to watch black and white films. They absolutely insist on color. Others will avoid foreign language films simply because they hate reading subtitles, or because dubbing that doesn't perfectly match the actors' mouths drives them crazy. It's like an instant brick wall built before the opening credits even finish rolling.
But honestly, that is a genuine tragedy. By refusing to venture beyond your comfortable preconceived norms, you're actively slamming the door on some incredible art. Because of categorical rejection, someone who inherently dislikes gangster movies might completely shun an absolute classic like Bonnie and Clyde. Or a viewer who says, "Ugh, I just hate musicals," might totally ignore a masterpiece like Chicago. By rejecting the entire category right out of the gate, they lose out on a deeply memorable experience, because those specific films are so much more than just simple, formulaic genre pieces. Just look at The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King as a perfect example of this. If you carry a rigid prejudice against fantasy movies, like maybe you just assume they're all silly swords and sorcery meant for kids, you'd ignore this one entirely. You would literally miss out on a monumental, groundbreaking cinematic achievement, all because it didn't fit neatly into your pre-approved little genre boxes.
To really appreciate a film like that, we have to adopt a highly specific mindset. We have to embrace this famous concept from the Romantic poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge, suspending disbelief. It basically means we have to willingly put our skepticism on pause when we're faced with narratives that break the natural, logical rules of our everyday reality. We literally have to challenge our own rigid notions of how the world works to fully experience the emotional journey the filmmaker has crafted for us.
All right, so that's genre. But let's look at another major roadblock: having totally inflexible preconceptions about what a movie is actually supposed to be. A lot of filmgoers have a surprisingly narrow outlook. They set up their own strict personal criteria for what makes a good film, and they instantly reject any movie that dares to operate under a different set of rules. You know the types. There are two absurd extremes that perfectly illustrate this. On one side, you have the viewer who firmly says, "Look, I just want to be entertained." That viewer gets genuinely offended by a film that happens to be grim, challenging, or depressing. Then, completely on the flip side, we have viewers who demand that every single film makes some profound, heavy artistic statement about the human condition. And if a movie isn't grim and depressing, they feel totally let down. Both of these mindsets are incredibly limiting, and they totally prevent us from enjoying a film on its own unique terms. This narrow mindset becomes a huge problem when we encounter rule-breaking films. For instance, if you demand to comprehend every single plot detail by the time the credits roll, you're going to absolutely reject Christopher Nolan's Memento, a film that deliberately requires multiple viewings just to untangle its basic timeline. Or, if you insist that a movie must hold you in a tight, fast-paced grip the entire time, you might completely dismiss Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey because of its famously slow-moving segments. Excellent films often get tossed aside just because the action isn't realistic or the characters aren't super likable. We've got to be open to a film's own specific goals. Okay, moving on to another huge blind spot: fixating on one specific element within a movie. This is honestly almost as detrimental as outright categorical rejection.
Instead of taking in the film as a complete, cohesive whole, we zero in on one tiny thing. The result? It completely clouds our overall judgment. It's a classic case of not being able to see the forest for the trees.
You've definitely heard this one before. It's that near-fatal case of actor worship, or, on the other hand, extreme actor antipathy. It's the whole, oh, I just love all Russell Crowe pictures, versus, I cannot stand Julia Roberts movies. These extreme reactions happen when viewers completely fail to realize that the actor is subordinate to the actual film. The actor is just one single piece of a giant puzzle. They're one instrument in an orchestra, not the entire symphony. But if there are two specific ingredients practically guaranteed to cause this kind of massive overreaction, it's sex and violence. This is a massive trap that so many viewers fall right into, and it often completely derails the conversation around a movie. Now, sure, some filmmakers absolutely exploit these elements to the point of being totally ridiculous. But a lot of times viewers will praise or condemn a movie purely based on its treatment of sex or violence, without ever considering the broader context of the film as a whole. And when we lose the context, we completely lose the point.
Because at the end of the day, context is literally everything. A truly perceptive filmgoer doesn't just condemn nudity or violence inherently. Sometimes films absolutely demand the use of these elements to honestly present the raw human stories they're trying to tell. For example, many film historians argue that the incredibly violent ending of Bonnie and Clyde doesn't dictate the overall quality of the film by itself. It is historically and narratively essential, and works as wildly different as Boys Don't Cry and Mrs. Henderson Presents actually require an emphasis on sexual encounters to accurately and truthfully tell their specific stories.
Now, beyond all those specific elements, we also have to be incredibly careful about the hype train, our own subjective expectations. Expecting way too much from a movie is a massive barrier. Maybe it won a ton of awards, maybe it has universal critical acclaim, or your best friends give it rave reviews. Or maybe you just fiercely love the source novel, and you've already visualized the perfect version in your head. When your expectations are set impossibly high, the actual film can't possibly measure up. That inevitable disappointment just ends up clouding a piece of work you might have otherwise loved immensely.
So with all these traps, the categorical rejection, the rigid rules, the weird fixations, and the impossibly high expectations, how do we actually fix this? How do we drop all this heavy baggage, stop watching the movie we want to see, and become truly receptive to what a filmmaker is actually trying to show us? Well, the ultimate cure comes from a brilliant rule of thumb by the late great film reviewer Roger Ebert. When he was defending a controversial film against a reader's intense objections, Ebert simply stated, "It's not what the movie is about that makes it good or bad, but how it is about it." It is such a vital reminder of the supremacy of style and form. We really need to stop obsessing over just the subject matter and start deeply appreciating how the filmmaker chose to actually express it.
So now that you're aware of your own biases and that invisible baggage you might be lugging into the theater, my final question to you is simply this. How are you going to watch your next movie? Are you ready to finally suspend your disbelief, drop those rigid rules, and let the movies speak entirely for themselves? Keep these tools in your back pocket the next time the lights go down, and I promise you, you'll experience the screen in a completely new way.